This was distributed to the news media today by the Obama administration, a very unusual Saturday press briefing. Very small fraction, we are told, of the intelligence haul they got. They're describing it as the largest cache of intelligence they've gotten from a senior terrorist figure ever. They are going through it, through all of that, handwritten documents, videos, DVDs, thumb drives, all of it, to get any clues that they can. The videos that they have distributed are very much a product of what the U.S. government has decided to show the world. Let's be very clear about that. There is no audio on them. That's been stripped off. They say they don't want to be in the business of distributing Osama bin Laden's message. For the videos, as you say, show a bin Laden with his beard and his facial hair dyed black. He's in more formal clothing, very much reading remarks. One of the first videos is labeled A Message to America, where he attacks America and capitalism again, his basic message. But it is this video, I think, that is capturing the world's attention. Bin Laden with no dye on his beard. A man hunched over a TV, his beard white, his facial hair white, a blanket around his shoulders, a cap on, peering at the television, looking at images of himself. We are told this all goes to the assessment they have that bin Laden was obsessed with his own image, very involved in how he looked, how he presented himself to the world. He's scouring newscasts on a satellite television channel to look at the pictures of himself. Where does this leave us now? What do we know about al-Qaeda? What do we know about bin Laden? What this senior intelligence official says is the assessment is that bin Laden was in fairly direct control of al-Qaeda, strategic control, offering the big picture guidance, tactical and operational control, getting down into the weeds, the details, the planning, the plots, that he had the ability to do this, and this is what he'd been doing for the last several years. He was doing this through a trusted group of couriers, use of thumb drives, use of a lot of operational security at his compound, so he could not be tracked. In the end, it was a courier that inadvertently gave him up. What are they saying about al-Qaeda? They say that all the evidence they have, that the U.S. government has, is that al-Qaeda is still interested in attacking the United States. They are combing through the intelligence for any clues about current plots and plans. And of course, they are looking very carefully to see who emerges as the next leader of al-Qaeda. Fred, John?
Barbara, I want to ask you a question. I'm really going to convey the thoughts that we heard earlier from Brigadier General Mark Kimmet, who made a point about the video that we all saw that struck us of Osama bin Laden alone in that dingy little room watching television, which is, it seems to work against what you're being told about how powerful and influential he was over a still operational terror network. You would think that if this man was the evil genius behind an army of jihadists, he could get himself, forgive me for being flip about this, but a better television set, a lazy boy, and some wallpaper. He looks like someone who's dirt poor and down on his luck.
Well, you're taking me into areas where, as a reporter, you know, I don't have proven facts about this. Nobody's really addressed it. But I think there are a couple of things you can derive from this picture, if you can keep it up on the screen for a minute, which is this was very much a compound where he was trying to stay hidden away from the world. So they weren't bringing in a lot of amenities. I don't think anybody wanted to see, you know, to carry on your analogy, wanted to see the delivery truck pull up with a lazy boy and wallpaper. The fact that he had satellite TV was probably his only real direct communication. They had no internet. They didn't have phone service. They were very careful about radiating or emanating any electronic signals that could be pulled up. Bin Laden was, by all accounts, obsessed with his image, very much in control. And so I think it makes sense that he is peering at the television. But there's something else here, which is if he's watching television, he is keeping up on current events in the world. I think if you go back to some of his messages that were broadcast, one of the fascinating things is a few times he made references to current events. If my memory serves me correctly, he made a reference once to the financial and economic crisis in the United States as it was emerging in the U.S., if my memory serves. This goes to the point that people had often wondered about. Was he shut away in some cave in Pakistan with absolutely no communication, or was he able to keep up somehow? And perhaps this satellite television access shows us he was able to keep up in at least some fashion.
Mark, in your view, why do you suppose the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, is releasing this kind of imagery of Osama bin Laden?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that what they're trying to do is demystify this icon who has terrorized the world for the last 10 years, show that, in fact, he was not 10 feet tall, he wasn't capable of doing anything he wanted, that, in fact, as shown in these home movies, in many ways, he seems to be this tired old man sitting in a chair. The problem, of course, is that at the same time they're trying to demystify Osama bin Laden, they're also saying that we now have discovered he's in far more operational control than we had ever thought. So there's this contradiction in this message that I would say the administration needs to be careful. If an old man in a rocking chair with a blanket over his shoulder can continue to conduct and manage the most feared terrorist organization in the world, we've got a lot to be worried about.
General, how calculated is this? To some extent, is this one part of a larger psychological operation against al-Qaeda? Where are they thinking about using, manipulating his images and this information to try and reach his followers even more in the days and weeks to come?
Well, no, I don't think that there's any intentional psychological operation going on here, either against al-Qaeda or against the American people. This is simply putting the facts out on what they've found, selective information that can be revealed that doesn't have direct intelligence value. But it's important for the world to understand the third dimension behind what we've seen for the last 10 years on bin Laden and the al-Qaeda organization. The world wants to know what was really behind the curtain. They're beginning to see a glimpse through selective release of non-classified information and give the public a better understanding of who we've been fighting for the last 10 years.
So I wonder, does the release of these images, does this cripple the al-Qaeda network in a different way than any crippling of the network may have taken place just as a result of his death?
I don't think it's going to cripple the network at all. The true believers are going to continue to fight. The real battlefield is for the hearts and minds, so to speak, of the general public. Those people that 10 years ago, as recently as 5 years ago, may have seen bin Laden and al-Qaeda in a positive light. This is just going to continue to keep the effort once the public really understands that this is an organization that really is not going out of their way to make things better, but only makes things far, far worse. This is just going to continue to feed the public knowledge of al-Qaeda and truly understand that the myth of al-Qaeda was not the truth, and now they're getting a chance to see what the real truth is.
How much does it diminish Osama bin Laden among his followers that he dyed his beard and his hair? Not very manly behavior. And I'm just curious, especially within his culture, within the culture of jihad, whether a man doing that just might appear even more feminine and thus slightly more ridiculous in death than he was, obviously, to his followers in life.
Well, any icon has got to live up to the image, has got to demonstrate that he's vital, capable, still aggressive. I think most people will take a look at this and realize that he may have been the most feared terrorist in the world, but he was human, he had vanities, and we're seeing those vanities come to light.
Do you have any personal views as to whether this kind of information, these images, should have been revealed?
Well, I think they should. I think it's important for the world to understand who this man was and what this organization is. There are limits to what can be released. Obviously, those images and that information that has direct intelligence value, not now, but perhaps later, can be declassified. I stand behind the president on his view of not putting out the image of bin Laden after death. I thought the expression, "we don't spike the football," is exactly the right answer. But there's as much damage by keeping everything away from the public. The public has a right to a point to this type of information, and I think the administration is doing the right thing as long as they can make sure it comes out in a manner that doesn't contradict itself, as some of these images versus this information that he was in operational control might betray.
So now that Osama bin Laden is dead, there's a lot of speculation about who will be the next al-Qaeda boss. Ayman al-Zawahiri, bin Laden's former deputy, well, he tops the list of most terrorism experts.
CNN's Michael Holmes has a look now at what makes al-Zawahiri a top candidate.
Speak to the whole world. Who are we? Who are we?
By the time Ayman al-Zawahiri burst onto the world scene after the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, he was already a terrorist, committed to turning Egypt into a fundamentalist Islamic state. The young doctor came from one of Egypt's leading families. There is even an al-Zawahiri street in Cairo named after his grandfather. His uncle described him as pious.
He was known that he is a good Muslim who is keen to pray at time in the mosque and to read and to think and to have his own decisions.
Al-Zawahiri spent 3 years in prison after Sadat's assassination. After he got out, he made his way to Pakistan, where he used his medical skills to treat those fighting the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. That's where he met Osama bin Laden in 1986, and they found a common cause. He talked about it a decade later.
We are working with Brother bin Laden. We know him since more than 10 years. We have fought with him here in Afghanistan, and we are working with him in Sudan and in many other places.
Al-Zawahiri was many places in the early 1990s, even, it's believed, visiting California on a false passport. His group attacked Egyptian embassies and tried to kill Egyptian politicians. Eventually, Al-Zawahiri folded his group into al-Qaeda.
Bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri were a sort of team, as it were. Ayman al-Zawahiri is the chief of dialogue of al-Qaeda. He's the #2 guy.
Al-Zawahiri was at bin Laden's side when he declared war on America in May 1998. Weeks later, they launched an attack on U.S. embassies in Africa and then gloated after they escaped a U.S. cruise missile attack launched in retaliation. After the 9/11 attacks, Al-Zawahiri began to become the voice of al-Qaeda, taunting the U.S.
American people, you must ask yourselves why all this hate against America.
After the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, bin Laden and al-Zawahiri were on the run, sometimes together, more often apart. His wife and daughters were killed in a U.S. airstrike aimed at him. But he continued to issue messages on subjects ranging from the war in Iraq to the London subway attacks in 2005. Recently, al-Zawahiri issued a tape calling on Muslims to attack NATO members for helping the rebellion against Colonel Gaddafi, a sign that he and al-Qaeda badly misjudged the Arab Spring. And while he was always the obvious choice to succeed Osama bin Laden, al-Zawahiri may not be the ideal candidate.
#2, Zawahiri, is not charismatic. He was not involved in the fight earlier on in Afghanistan. And I think he has a lot of detractors within the organization. And I think you're going to see them start eating themselves from within more and more.
Without bin Laden, al-Qaeda can never be the same.
It was an idea personified by Osama bin Laden. He was this charismatic figure. To join al-Qaeda, you pledged a personal oath to him. People went and died, not for Ayman Zawahiri or Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, but for Osama bin Laden.
Terror experts say that to jihadists worldwide, al-Qaeda still has great appeal as an inspiration. Zawahiri's challenge, beyond staying alive, is to remake an organization made up of scattered factions, hampered by a lack of funds and ravaged by death. Michael Holmes, CNN, Atlanta.